Good morning, folks. It looks like we have as many here, at least the pre-registered. There are about 6 people attending here, and I believe there's 7 or 8 on Skype. So welcome to all of you, and I hope that when you get done with this presentation, you will contact all your friends, family, and loved ones and let them know what they missed over the next hour and a half. Thank you very much for joining us today. We have an awful lot to cover, and we will go into those details quickly and thoroughly. My main goal is that you leave here with all of your questions answered, and we're able to at least get you folks on the road to submitting great applications. We will be having this Skype session today. We encourage those who are on the line to submit questions by email, by Skype chat during it at any time, and also just to holler in if you would prefer to do it that way. Same thing with folks here in the room. We're going to take some time for questions at the end, but certainly if you have questions as we're going along, don't hesitate to ask. Also wanted to let you know there will be a second webinar on June 13th, I believe. It's also posted on the website. That is not a presentation. It's just a time when I will be sitting here on Skype if someone has some questions and you want to check in with us. So please let us know. We have a couple people helping us with this event here today. Bethany Sargent, our communications person, is helping with the logistics, as is Rachel Ross, our AmeriCorps intern. Rachel's also going to be transcribing the questions that are asked today, and we're going to be posting those on the website as an FAQ, just as updates for you. And we will also do that after the 13th, and also any questions that come in during the period of the grant process so that you folks can get those updates. And Emily Bird is also here with us, who's going to be helping with some of the details of the slides as we move forward. So there's some backup for when I don't know the answers to some of your questions. So the purpose of today is to focus on the Ecosystem Restoration Grant Program. As you know, there are other RFPs that are up, and I want to go into those very briefly. But we'll probably be focusing primarily on the major grants. But let's start with these just so you have a little bit of an overview. The River Corridor Easement RFP was issued last week. There's approximately $325,000 available for organizations to submit multiple easement requests, River Corridor easement applications. Instead of us getting 5 or 6 of them from an organization to the regular grant round as we have in the past, we're giving this opportunity to put them in a bulk. You may still submit to the Ecosystem Restoration Grant Program for River Corridor easements if you choose, but this is an opportunity if you have more than one that you want to submit. We want that due back to us by June 21st and hope to be getting award letters out by mid-July. The other new program that was announced last week that I think some of you have already seen is the Block Grant Program. As most of you know, there is substantially more money that is anticipated to be coming to the Agency of Natural Resources for clean water work this year. The word anticipated is key since the budget obviously has not yet been signed by the governor and we're still waiting to see what comes of that. But based on that, we will be getting more money than we're used to having. So we are piloting a couple new options for getting money out in a more expedited manner, and one is the Block Grant Program, where there's about $1.5 to $2 million available to one or more organizations who will then take that money and implement projects with it. We will not be micromanaging the details of this. The entire process for this will be on the hands of the grantee. The grantee, the chosen applicants, will be responsible for going to the A&R database, which I'm going to be talking more about later. There is a subset of that database, which is unfortunately called the Go List. I think we probably could get more creative than that for a name in the future, but we'll work on that. But those are some priority projects that are ready to move forward with construction, and those are the projects that the recipient of the block grant will be selecting from in administering this. This particular RFP is only for process. The applicants only have 2 weeks to submit this application, but it is just to describe the capacity of your organization to administer this large an amount of funding, your understanding of the Go List, the database, and how to move construction projects forward faster, and your plan for doing so, as well as your plan for addressing any potential conflicts such as permits and things like that. If there are questions about this grant program, if we have time at the end, we can certainly take them. Right now I want to focus on the ecosystem restoration grants separately, but understand that many of you either in the room or on Skype are also interested in this program. So please save those questions for the end if possible. The due date on that is June 5th. Now, sort of new, ecosystem restoration grant RFP. We have a little bit more than $3 million in that category right now, which is about the same as we normally have for this particular program. The RFP was released 2 days ago and will be due July 5th. We anticipate giving awards by the end of July. Obviously want to deal with the elephant in the room, which is the fact that many of you submitted applications last round and may have still not received your grant agreements. And all I can say is my apologies, and that we are working with the business office to have them expedite as quickly as possible. Just a note on that, if you are able to start your project prior to receiving funding, if you have that fiscal capability, you can start your project 90 days before the grant agreement is signed. So if you choose to do that, just let us know, but feel free to start that process. And if you also have projects that are very time sensitive, they absolutely have to get started by the 1st of July or something like that, let us know. We will be moving those up on the priority list, or I will at least work with the business office who is responsible for doing these grant agreements to try and facilitate that as best as possible. The main thing that I want to go through, if you could just hang up that phone for me, please, Ron, that just fell over. The main thing that I want to go through today with regards to the Ecosystem Restoration Grant RFP is to talk about some of the changes that are in the process. Some of those are due to legislative guidance. Those of you who followed the legislature this year might have seen that we got a lot of attention from them. There was going to be more money coming to us, therefore they were much more interested than they have been in the past in how we've spent previous funds. And we received quite a bit of guidance and direction from them on how to be doing things moving forward. Some of that is reflected in the changes you'll see. Some of it is related to our need to get dollars out the door quickly and efficiently. We have very clearly been told by the legislature that we need to be spending this money quickly if we want to be receiving money in fiscal year 19. So it is incumbent on us to be efficient and cost effective on this, and we're obviously going to be working with you folks to do that. And then some of the changes, thankfully, are also in response to comments from you folks, partners who are doing this, some streamlining that you would like to see. You may not see everything in here that you wish to have happened, but we are always welcome for feedback and want to hear that. So let's get going on the Ecosystem Restoration Grant Program itself. The biggest news about this is that there is now an application manual, a multi-page document that is available on our website. Please, I encourage you to go and look at that manual. It hopefully has all of the answers to your questions. If not, let me know, but please feel free to start there. I do want to, I can't do it now because we're on a different setup here. Shoot. I was hoping to be able to link directly to the manual, which I can't do now, but if you go to the manual, you can see that if you click on something in the table of contents, it will take you directly to the page where that subject is. And also within the pages, there are links to further information. So for example, if you go to the section on tactical basin planning, you will see a link to the Watershed database. So feel free to peruse through that and let us know what you think of that manual.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you want me to pull the manual up? I can do it on my computer and then present.
That would be great. If you could pull up that and also pull up the application and each of the appendices.
Okay.
It would be really great to be able to access those.
Okay.
Thanks. With regards to the manual, we will also be updating that as questions come in from you folks. If you'll look at the manual, if you happen to have seen it already, there is a date in the upper right-hand corner. If that date is different from 2 days ago, that means we've added something to it. So we will be updating that as things go along. But as I said, there will also be an FAQ on the website. So we will make sure that any changes to the manual are also in the FAQ, so you don't have to be perusing through both.
Marley, will there be a way to know what it is that's changed? So if we see a new date, we know something's changed in the document?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We'll make sure that it's also in the FAQ, and I will highlight it in the document so you can see it also. Right. Yeah, rather than having you do a side-by-side comparison, which can be a pain in the neck. So, I really would welcome your feedback on this manual. The idea was to try and make it as helpful as possible. If it's not, try to find a way to delicately tell me that so that we can improve it for you moving forward. Next change in the ecosystem restoration grants that I think is important to share is the way that we're going to be awarding grants moving forward. One of the challenges that I think many of you have had is that we have not had a consistent timeline for when we're going to be issuing these grants. We put out an RFP on some date, and then we say we may or may not do one at a later date. It makes it difficult for you folks to be planning when you might want to do construction, or if you miss one grant round, not knowing when your next opportunity will be. What we have decided to do is have an open application process. So starting now, you can submit an application for ERP grants at any time. And we will be batching those and reviewing them on a quarterly basis. So the RFP was just issued on July 5th. We're going to gather in all of the applications we've received by then, review them, rank them, decide which ones we want to fund, and let you know hopefully by the end of July. Then again in September, we will be doing that same batching, gathering, reviewing. And we will continue this process until we run out of money. So while these dates are set, and I encourage you to use them, I also encourage you to keep in mind that there is only $3-something million, and when it runs out, it will run out. We will keep you updated on the status of that so that you know when we're getting close to the end. So please don't expect to be able to get into the last grant round, for example, and try and plan accordingly and stay in touch with us, but at least this gives you a little bit more consistency of information with regards to pending available funds.
Marley, is
Yes.
there a must start your project by? Is it still within 60 days, 90 days for each of these rounds?
There is. It's within 3 months of the grant signing, the grant agreement signing. So
Oh, not from the award date.
that's not fair to you guys, since the grant awards contracts agreements have been somewhat delayed. So, and we'll be talking about that more later also.
One other thing, just
Yeah.
you said it, and in the, what are we calling this, manual, it says July 5th, but in the DEC website, the thing that talked about today's meeting, it says July 6th.
Yeah, this is a mistake actually, because we anticipated getting the RFP out on the 22nd. We got it out on the 23rd. We added another day at the end. We'll update it on the website, and here the date is July 6th.
Okay.
You're correct on that. We moved the RFP release date out one day. We'll move this date out. I just didn't correct it here.
Marley, you could also get to all those documents from the website as well if you wanted to just get to that page, the manual. I think.
Yeah, but I don't have all the stuff, so we don't need
Okay.
to right now.
Okay.
But yeah, I will later. And can you help me with that, Emily, later? Okay, great. Next slide, we're going to start talking about some of the funding sources and amounts and priorities. First of all, to let you know what money we have available, just a brief review. I'd be surprised if most of you on Skype and in the room don't know the details of grant funding, so I'll go through it lightly. We have 2 pots of money that we draw from. One is the state capital funds. Those are bonds that must be allocated for projects that are actually bricks and mortar type things. As most of you know from prior funding, this money can also go towards the design and engineering related to those projects, but as of this year, it cannot go towards assessment. So, for example, stormwater master plans are no longer able to be used for capital funding, so we will need to use clean water funds for those. So there is a little bit of a switch. That won't matter to you guys because we combine the pots together and decide what we fund. So you're still able to apply for those types of things, but they will not be capital eligible in the future.
The design is still linked to implementation.
Design is still, yes. Preliminary design, final design, and implementation. Yeah. Capital funds, as you know, are from 0.2% of the property transfer tax, as was decided in Act 64, passed by the legislature a year ago, 2 years ago, something like that. And this year we have about $1.7 million coming from that, from the Clean Water Fund that is set for the Agency of Natural Resources. There are additional clean water funds that are going to Agency of Transportation and Agency of Agriculture. But our total budget is about $9.4 million of funds that we have to get out the door in the next year.
With all the agencies?
No,
No.
Just A&R.
Just A&R, yep. This is just our money. So some of that, as we talked about earlier, will be going out in the block grant. Some of it will be in the River Corridor Easement Grant, and some will also be in the Ecosystem Restoration Grant. There are going to be some other funding opportunities that we will be developing in the next couple weeks, and stay tuned on the website for those. There are also some specific allocations that are going to specific projects. But this is the baseline amount of money that we have available. As far as priorities go, hopefully none of this will be a big surprise to you, but let's go through it in a little bit of detail. First of all, one of the primary priorities for capital funds and for clean water funds, and this is not new, is Tier 1 projects. You folks will remember that the Treasurer's report was submitted to the legislature in January. Many of you were part of the stakeholder process in getting that written. The Appendix 1 to that report is a series of massive spreadsheets that indicate what are Tier 1 expenses and what are Tier 2 expenses, and the resources that are needed to meet those. It explains all the gaps in funding and where the funds should be allocated. Tier 1 costs are those that are necessary to be meeting state and federal regulations and priorities and state plans such as TMDLs, and for compliance with Act 64, so the requirements that are in 64 for doing the municipal roads general permit, for example, which will be coming out next year, and also the CSO policy. So if you go to the Treasurer's Report Appendix 1, which I had hoped to pull up for you here, but it doesn't much matter, you can see where those are. You'll see they're very general. It's meeting stormwater rules and requirements. It's meeting agricultural rules and requirements, things like that. But Tier 1 costs are primary for priorities.
That includes the flow, impaired streams.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
The second bullet is that there is priority to activities that are identified in tactical basin plans. I think that's certainly nothing new for any of you either. The tactical basin plans are updated every 5 years, as all of you know. Some of them are more tactical than others and are being done differently. The ones that have been done in the last year certainly are more advanced than those in the past. One of the frequent questions that we get is whether or not something has to be in a newer tactical plan to be able to be eligible. No. If there is something indicated in a tactical basin plan or something related to priorities in previous tactical basin plans, that certainly meets this criteria. The third one is a priority for projects that have a higher pollution reduction potential. Now again, that can be a little bit difficult to quantify in some cases. The database that is being developed, that I'll talk more about in a couple minutes, and Emily will also talk about, the goal for that is for us to be quantifying the pollution reduction value of that project, literally putting a phosphorus or a nitrogen reduction value to it. Those are estimates, obviously, and based on a lot of factors, and there are some places where we're not able to quantify that. We will be looking at improving that in the future, and if a project doesn't have a numerical quantification set to it, it doesn't mean that we're not going to award funding to it, but it is on the applicant to demonstrate the value of this project from a pollution reduction point of view. That might be from designs that you've gotten from a 30% design on a stormwater project, for example, that might indicate what the potential is for phosphorus reduction, or your best information based on research, knowledge, etc. So it is on the applicant to demonstrate to us what the value is of the project.
Is that per dollar spent?
There will be a cost efficiency also. That's one of the other priorities here is budget and cost effectiveness is the,
So a lot of little projects can be
Absolutely.
good because of per dollar spent. Yeah.
And also we'll be factoring in the lifespan of a project.
Lifespan and dollar value.
Project readiness is another criteria for prioritization. If that project is to be moving out and getting done quickly, again, since you now know what the grant rounds are, if you are not going to be able to start within 3 months, we encourage you to wait for the next round. But those that are able to move more quickly, that have permits ready to go, or will be able to get permits quickly, things like that, that you have state support and documentation of operation and maintenance, especially for implementation projects, things like that, those all affect the project readiness. And then the last thing, as Marty mentioned also, is targeting impaired waters is obviously a priority for us. Any other questions on this?
So is that list, it's not a prioritized list, it's
It
just
is not in
a
priority
list.
order.
Okay.
No.
Gotcha.
This is the list of priorities, yeah.
Gotcha.
And just about everything I'm talking about now is in the manual somewhere. And this PowerPoint will also be available to you folks. So a lot of folks here that are frantically scribbling down notes, and I'm just encouraging you to look in other places also. We will make this available to you if that makes it easier for you. Since this is a question that comes up on a pretty regular basis, I wanted to address the private lands issue. We often get questions from folks about whether or not projects that are on private lands are eligible for ecosystem restoration funding. In the past, we have been told that we cannot use bond money for work on private land. The treasurer released a legal report to us several months ago that said, yes, capital money can be used on private land. However, the legislature is strongly encouraging us to allocate funds to projects that are not on private land, municipally sponsored or municipal lands themselves. However, that does not mean that private land is not eligible. And this is the way it's worded in the manual, as you will see when you look at it. We do encourage you to submit applications for projects on private land because, as you saw from the previous priority list, our goal is to address major water quality problems. If there is an egregious water quality impact on private land, we want to work with you to try to address that. But I do want to make clear that we will be prioritizing municipal project proposals ahead of private land ones. If you do want to submit a proposal on private land, these are 3 criteria that I strongly encourage you to word carefully and thoroughly. One is, how is this going to address a significant water quality concern? If it is just somebody's driveway running into a ditch, that will probably be less likely to rise to the top of the priorities among the applications that we receive. And also make sure that there's an operations and maintenance plan for this. We are very dependent on having these O&M plans moving forward. This is critical to the legislature, that we're not just kicking dollars out the door and not ensuring that they're going to be met into the future. And we'll talk more about that in the future, or later in this slide presentation.
So that's nothing different than what you would expect from public lands. It's all the same.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's just somehow the private applications didn't tend to do that historically?
Private lands have been limited in the past to $30,000, and there is no cap on that anymore like there was in the past. We had said we put up to $30,000 aside for private lands.
Yeah.
That does not exist anymore. So
Still
hopefully that will
confused
help.
about that one.
You're still confused? What's the
Yeah, I
question?
mean, I don't understand why private land is being, like, singled out for maybe restricted giving, where, you know, if you look at the whole landscape and all the catchments and all the mapping that we have, you know, you gotta target the problems in the various catchments, and whether it's private or public.
I think before it was only there was a restriction of just $30,000 that could possibly go to private land, and now I think what you're saying, and correct, is that now it's open to any amount of money, but they're still going to often prioritize.
But you said you're going to give money to public lands first.
Public lands are going to be prioritized per the directive of the legislature.
Yeah.
The main reason why we're having this
Just trying to
discussion now is
understand that.
because you don't understand it. That's
Still not buying the logic. Not getting the
the
logic.
logic is based on the legislature's desire to use state dollars for state-related projects that address the things that are priorities in Tier 1. And addressing municipally sponsored land is a priority in the Treasurer's report and with the legislature. We're following the directive of the legislature on that.
Yeah.
So the main reason for calling it out here is because if you average all the questions that I get with regards to these grants, this is by far the most frequent is, will you fund anything on private land?
Yeah, it's a big question.
And just to add a little bit to that, this is primarily prioritization of work on private lands for stormwater and road-related work, private roads and stormwater. Natural resources, it's always been an understanding that these funds are eligible for private land for natural resource restoration. So there's limited opportunities.
Marley, can I ask you a question on municipal lands? Does it matter if the Watershed group applies versus the town? Like, say we're working together on a municipal-owned project. Does it make any difference who the
If it's municipal
applicant?
property, then it's fine if you apply.
Doesn't
Yes.
matter who.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
This is one of the big changes that isn't going to go over very well. The legislature has suggested to us that we restrict the amount of money that is available for equipment grants. In the past, we have funded a great deal higher than $100,000, but that is a limit in the Ecosystem Restoration Grants program for this year, $100,000 for equipment grants. Obviously, that's not going to be buying a lot of street sweepers and vectors. It'll buy a few hydroseeders. We also are requiring match on equipment, which we have not required in the past. So large municipalities, greater than 5,000 people, will have to put up 50% match, and smaller ones who are sharing equipment, 20% match. An operations and maintenance plan will be required, which it has been in the past, but will be a little different this year is that DEC will want to review and approve that O&M. It's going to need to say something a little bit more than we will change the oil every couple of years if we get around to it, which obviously is not what it was. But we do need to be able to demonstrate so that we can increase the amount of money available for equipment in the future, how we are quantifying the use of this equipment moving past the year of funding. We may be discussing with anyone who gets grant funds for equipment the idea of an annual report into the future. Now again, these grant funds are only for a year. We're not going to be funding you submitting an annual report to us 5 years from now. But it will be of great value to not only us, but also to municipalities and towns themselves to be documenting on a regular basis how this equipment is being used. It's going to help ensure that we're able to get more money for equipment in the future. It's also, very importantly, going to be able to help us ensure that we're accurately tracking the phosphorus reduction that is being achieved by this equipment, which is also helpful to us to be able to ask for further money in the future for equipments. Right now, in Emily's tracking, she is estimating the usage of equipment moving forward. An annual report would give us a more accurate representation of the number of miles of roads, for example, that a hydroseeder is used on or something like that. So there may be some additional requests with regards to equipment in the future, and we'll work with folks who are awarded funding in their grant agreement on that. The next section is the Watershed's project database. I think just about everybody has probably heard about this by now, and as I mentioned earlier, this is an effort by DEC to quantify, identify, describe, prioritize, quantify all of the water quality projects that need to be done to be meeting our water quality goals statewide. We've been talking about this for quite a while. The idea of tactical basins plans being dynamic is predicated around this, the idea of a database that will be updated on a regular basis, added to, taken from. The projects are going to come from the tactical basin planning process, but also from partners like you who will be contributing to it. And Neil Kamen, the program manager for MAP, is developing a protocol for how to work with DEC for getting projects into the database. Basically what it's going to be is talk to your basin planner. There'll be a few more details than that, but anytime you have a project that you think has a water quality improvement value to it, please go to your basin planner and talk to them about it. Once projects get into the database, they are scored based on its ability to address the water quality stressors that are part of the surface water management strategy. If you go to our website, and I have a bunch of links at the end of this presentation, but if you go to the website for the tactical basin planning, there is a list of the stressors, and the ranking within the database is based on its ability to address those stressors. Where possible, there is also going to be a nutrient reduction value attached to each of these projects, which will help us prioritize also. We know that this database is not at all complete. We totally understand that. And this is not the only place where projects can come from to be funded by ecosystem restoration grants. That is not true for the block grants. As I mentioned earlier, though, the block grants must come off of the GO list, which is a subset of the database. But for this program, ecosystem restoration grants, you do not have to choose a project off the database. What you do have to do, however, though, is if you are submitting an application for a project that is not in the database, you must contact the basin planner ahead of time so that they can put it into the database, give it an identification number that you must then add to the application itself. This is not a time-consuming process by any means. Just get in touch with your basin planner. They put it in, they give you a number, you put it on page 1 of the application. Admittedly, please don't wait until 2 hours before the application is due. They would be grateful for that. So please stay in touch with them on that.
What's status mean?
So the status in the database is whether or not it's been evaluated by the basin planner for its stressors and benefits, whether or not it's been funded, it's been completed, and then once it's been completed, if it's an implementation project, it would be in its operation and maintenance.
So does the basin planner do a status thing before the application due date? Like rank it, like you described?
So
For
when
a benefit?
proposal comes in, you can work with your basin planner
Yeah.
to get the the project scored in the database ahead of time. When a project comes in, we're reworking the database so that it's marked as this project's been proposed. And then once it's selected for funding, the status will be selected for funding. And then once the agreement has been executed, the status will be funded. So once you have been awarded a project, other applicants who may have been interested in doing that project will know that somebody's already pursuing that and that it's
So is that the review process instead of the review committee once an application is submitted? No.
That's totally separate.
It's just a step
Pre-ranking.
so that we can keep the status of these projects in the database up to date so that you wouldn't go in to look for a project to apply for and then realize that it's already been funded by and somebody else is.
So the review committee looks at that right there to do their, as part of their review process? Right now it's the beginning, it's just the first one where they rank it, the basin plan ranks it.
The ranking is not going to be complete by the review process because there are going to be more projects coming in. The goal is for all projects to end up being ranked, but we're not using that ranking criteria right now because we don't have it for everything. We can't use it for everything. You will note if you go to the application manual, the link to this particular site, which is right in the manual, will bring you to just an empty screen. It is a relatively self-explanatory process for searching for projects. If you have any questions at all, please just contact your basin planner and they can help you go through it.
I would encourage you to change it to a opening in a separate window because I'm now in that page.
The link from the manual?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it takes me out of the manual to that page. Now I've done five searches and I have to go back through each one to get back to the manual.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. We can definitely fix that. And the links that are on the grants web page do open up in a new window, so you don't have to go back. But yes, that is a great idea.
I'm not totally technology.
I know, it's pretty crazy. Of course, I could tell you how you could just open it in another tab.
Probably
Not to do that, so.
Lots of ways to solve the problem.
Another major change, but not, I think, a cumbersome one that is in the application process now is the requirement that this particular map be submitted. You'll recall the last round of ecosystem restoration grants, you had to submit a map, but you could do it on the back of an envelope, kind of draw pictures yourself. Now what we are asking is that you use this particular map template. What is really nice, and I'm not sure if Emily can go to it or not. Did you pull up the Appendix 1?
Yes, I have them, and I just... Yeah, you can just click on that.
Well, no, that's the Atlas link.
You don't want to do the Atlas link?
I wanted to go to the appendix if that's available.
If
it's not,
if you just go to the website, to the grants page, I can give you the...
If you go to the grants page, Appendix 1 to the manual is the very detailed directions on how to do this map. It is not difficult at all, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact your basin planner. There is a pre-developed screening layer that is in the database, and if you go to the upper left and click on the Atlas layers, there's a drop-down, and it specifically says Ecosystem Restoration Screening Layer. That's the one you use. It is pre-populated with various layers, such as wetlands, hydric soils,
River corridors.
Nice. Shoreland buffers. So you need to submit a map to us that identifies where your project is, and then click on this screening layer, and it will show you whether there are any potential impacts to it. For example, your project is sitting in the middle of a Class 2 wetland. Now, if your project appears to have a conflict, it doesn't necessarily mean it won't occur, but I strongly encourage you to talk to the basin planner before you submit the application and see whether it's likely to occur. If it's a stormwater pond smack in the middle of a Class 2 wetland, going to be difficult to get that permit. But certainly there are other areas where there is some flexibility in that, certainly for high priority projects. So what folks are bringing up right now is Appendix 1, which simply shows you all of the directions. That's fine, Emily, thanks. Shows you the directions for filling out this map. So the idea with this is for us to help identify any potential conflicts before they arise so that we're not trying to figure it out during the application process, or even worse, after we've given you money to do it. If your project appears to be near a conflict, because as we know, the layers are not perfect. Every wetland is not mapped. Every area of concern is not identified. If you have any thought that there might be a potential conflict, or if it's on the edge of a wetland area, please talk to your basin planner, or don't hesitate to get in touch with the program person who would be pertinent to this, the wetlands ecologist for your area, or the river corridor, the stream person for your area. All of those names, contact information, maps of who is where are available on the website also. So, and again, your basin planner is always the one who can direct you more quickly if you need that. But we are requiring this map to be submitted in this format with your project. If you're doing an assessment or an evaluation, like stormwater master plan or something like that, obviously you don't have a point, but we still would like to see a map of the general area. Make it a polygon instead, or just send us the general area that you're going to be working in. Okay?
Nice.
Yeah.
So
Good.
Yeah,
We like that. Excellent.
Way good.
A change that's positive. Good.
the word conflict, though, like every dam removal that I do is going to impact a wetland to some extent. It's not necessarily like conflict. So
So again, that just means that there needs to be some discussion with the wetlands people. If you're in the very preliminary stages where you're just assessing it, that's going to be part of the process. We understand that. But if you're now moving up to implementation, we're hoping that stuff has been identified already and dealt with. By the time we're funding $300,000 to take a dam out, we definitely want to know that the wetland issues have been addressed prior to that.
It's kind of like saying wetland permit should be done in the design stage.
Wetland permitting should absolutely be done in the design stage. That is one of the things that we have found a little bit frustrating is some of the implementation project requests that come in that still have not identified a wetlands conflict or the need for a wetlands permit. And once we paid for 1 or 2 levels of design, we would have anticipated by then the wetlands issues would have been addressed, because we don't want to pay for a 30% design and then 60% design, get to implementation and find out the project can't happen because a permit cannot be
If
issued.
you want to pay for 30% design without having had a wetland permit?
we can't get a wetland permit unless you have a design.
This is the real question here.
Now, there has to be some kind of design to determine what the project is, but we want to catch it there.
Seems like I'd like to clarify when you want your permit by.
We'll see that later when we talk about
Cool,
deliverables.
okay.
Yep.
Good.
We talked a little bit about the operation and maintenance agreements. Just a reminder that we are requiring these for implementation projects. I don't think that's a shock. If we're going to be putting money into implementing something, we do want to know that there is an O&M for it. And we will require that a letter of commitment to that be submitted with the application. Other projects that are not implementation that have an O&M attached to them or support for the commitment to that O&M would certainly be favored. For example, if you're only at 30% design, but that town is definitely going to be doing it if we approve it to implementation, put in that letter of commitment. That will certainly strengthen your project to know that early on that there is a commitment to it. The operations and maintenance plan will have to be discussed with us so that we can look at it and see what's going on. And as I said before, there may be some discussions about annual reporting in the future, but that will be part of the grant agreement and discussed with you folks ahead of time.
Right, so this came up in our recent round about stewardship. And so, for example, if we're removing a dam, how do we ensure that no one builds a dam there in the future?
Well, they'll probably have to get a permit to do it,
I don't
so
know,
there might be
right.
some control on the other
But
end.
I don't own the river.
But no guarantee.
So there's still a little bit of a question in my mind as to this new piece of, maintenance is, I would think of that more as like, if there, some damage happens to the site or invasive.
Yeah, that's the primary thing. Certainly something like a dam going in 100 years when we've decided that damming up our rivers is critical for energy and we're less concerned about water quality, or whatever decision is made in the future, that a dam goes in. That's obviously not something that we're restricting in the future. That would need to be permitted. There will be other ways to control that. For something like a dam removal, to me, an operation and maintenance would be related to activities related to the dam removal. So, for example, there's some stream bank work that's done or something like that, wetlands restoration that's done. Those secondary projects that are connected to the dam removal, those would have to have an O&M. But that's maintaining the work that's related.
Because I was thinking I was going to we're going to get every landowner to agree to do a conservation easement for, eternity, but okay, good. No offense.
That'd be a good thing.
It would.
You all want to work together on that? Put that in the application.
Yeah.
All right, a couple other changes with regards to performance measures, milestones, and deliverables. None of those terms are new. We've had them in the application process before, but there are a few changes to this. So, for example, with the performance measures, are you able to go to Appendix 2? I'm not sure we really have to, but because I do have that there. But you have always had to indicate what the performance measures are for the project, and we have an appendix on the website that indicates what these project types are. These are pre-designed identification names that are already available, the definition of what that is, and then the performance measures attached to it. As you know from past applications, you have to select the performance measures that are connected to your project type, and you must let us know the quantification of it. This year, we are also giving you the option of adding a third performance measure if you choose, because we have heard from folks that sometimes the performance measures that are with that project type just don't fit. If there's something else you want to put in, by all means do so. But we are dependent on the performance measures that are in this list for us to be tracking and quantifying so that we can demonstrate to the EPA what we have achieved through, and to the legislature and to the taxpayers what we have achieved in putting out this public funding.
That's really nice. Do you link the type there to the original thing in the table that you created?
And there are multiple pages
Really nice.
of it, obviously, for all of the different
That's
project
awesome.
types. So,
Yeah.
and same thing if you're able to go to Appendix 3. The next section is with regards to the milestones and deliverables. Now, in the past, we've asked you to fill out a table with milestones and deliverables. That has resulted in quite a wide variety of milestones and deliverables, as you can imagine. And then we have to work individually with you in the grant agreement to make sure we get what we need. That's been a waste of time. So now we have a table that is called milestones and deliverables. These are preset. You must use these. There is a space in the application, which we will look at in a minute, where you will fill these in. So if there are milestones and deliverables listed, these are what we require you to do. You are free to add more if you want to. And as we will probably be discussing later, one of the other changes with regards to the budget is that we're not paying on performance measures anymore. We've been told now by the legislature that we need to be paying on costs. We're not going to ask you for every invoice, but we're going to pay you on the cost of the project. So if you get X amount, $10,000 to do a project, you send us a bill for $2,000 and you let us know what you did with that $2,000. You send us a bill for another $2,000 as you meet various deliverables. You can invoice us as many times as you need to during the course of the grant period, but you must meet the deliverables as you're going along. So if there are any concerns about the order of the deliverables, that's something we need to talk about during the grant process. But the way we've designed this is hopefully so that they are in order, and you will invoice based on those deliverables in order. Again, any concerns, get in touch with us.
And the deliverables have to be submitted in order for an invoice to be issued.
Or the final invoice in that. But
Or in process.
You can invoice prior to
A deliverable being shipped over.
Completed,
Gotcha.
but you can't invoice on the next deliverable
Gotcha.
until you've completed the first one.
Okay,
Does that change how staff time can be?
It shouldn't, because you won't have a deliverable attached to staff time. Like there isn't so many hours at this one and hours at that one. So you can invoice for staff time anytime during the course of that process. Yeah.
Could you say that again about the sequencing? That they have to you have to complete one before the second one is invoiceable. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. So, for example, is there one for easements? Yeah, there we go. River or corridor easements. So before you can invoice us for the property survey, for example, you must complete the ones prior to that and invoice for those. Now, you can complete them in different orders, but you can't invoice for the property survey until you have completed the locator map and the site plan.
Okay.
And again, as I said, if you find that there is a major conflict with the order of these, get in touch with us. This is the first time we're doing it. We're open to discussions on this. But the idea is for us to streamline this, make it easier for you. You don't have to think about this. You just put them into the application, and we don't have to negotiate during the grant agreement process, which is very slow and laborious.
So do we get chit-chat with David or Basin Planner?
With regards to additional,
Invoicing, questioning stuff.
talk to either, as far as the invoice questions.
Yeah, like if we want to issue an invoice we're in the middle of task 1, and we want to invoice for task 1, partial, and he has a question,
Your invoices will still go to David, but there will still be a grant manager, either me, Emily, other people, that have to approve the invoices.
Gotcha. So he'll just ship
you'll
it to
know who
you.
your grant manager is, ship it to us, we'll talk with David, we can deal with that.
Question from Marie. What about projects that have multiple sub-projects that will be happening simultaneously?
We'll probably have to work on those separately. But the applications guide now is only one project per application. So there shouldn't be too much multiple stuff going on. That's one of the other changes that you may or may not have noticed on the application is one application per project, unless you're submitting under the block grant or something like that. The exception to this, obviously, I see Ron's hand going up, is if you're doing two projects that are immediately adjacent to each other. For example, you're doing a stream bank restoration project and planting trees at the same time. Obviously, those two projects go together. And we might need to negotiate the deliverables based on those if there are extenuating circumstances.
But like you could have planning and implementation in one app?
No.
Yeah, so just RE, those categories could be
Yes.
lumped. Yeah, gotcha.
So that means those partnership grants that you developed for last time are no more.
No more.
That was a one-time.
That is one time and it's gone.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Because what we found was that it was almost impossible to compare an application to an application, which we were a little worried about, but ended up being even worse than we thought and caused our lawyers a fair amount of stress and heartburn. So, and also we found that when we got multiple projects in an application, sometimes we liked 4 of them, but we didn't like the 5th. And it's not appropriate for us to say to you, Marty, we like 4 of your projects, but we don't like the 5th. So we are telling you, you have to do it, resubmit your application. That's not an appropriate way to handle it. You guys submit a project, we look at them individually and compare like projects to like projects. So,
I was going to ask about dates. So in our current ERP grants, we have milestones, deliverables, and a date. Will these new ones have dates attached to them also?
there are not dates. You have to meet a deliverable.
Okay.
And you have to complete the project by the end. But again, it behooves you to move it forward
By the end of
quickly.
the grant.
By the end of the grant period.
Agreement.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Marley, another question online from Carrie Doyle. Can you
Carrie
clarify?
Dolan?
Carrie
Oh my gosh.
Doyle. Can you clarify that river corridor easements are not on an individual project basis? One application with a list of projects. Yes. So I think
The River Corridor Easement Grant RFP.
I think
is
that's
separate.
what she's asking.
Yes, that is a different process entirely.
Okay.
That makes sense? So hopefully this will be helpful to you. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with us, especially if you have any questions about any of the deliverables. And we're going to talk some about a few of them later on. So we can get back to the PowerPoint.
July. Okay.
All right. And Emily, do you want to take this one? Because this relates directly to the deliverables we were just talking about.
So in addition to the final performance reports, which you're all pretty familiar with at this point, we have the final performance reports at the project level reporting on a summary of the project accomplishments, your performance measures, before and after photos, that level of detail. Where there's BMP implementation, primarily stormwater treatment practices or buffer plantings, we now have an additional page that we're attaching on to the final performance report template that allows us to gather BMP level data so that we're able to quantify the nutrient load reductions associated with those projects. We really need to be tracking at the BMP level because we need to capture the area that's being treated by a practice, the land use characteristics of that area, and then the type of practice and a little bit more detail about the practice that was implemented. And so we have developed, and they're all posted on our website, what these additional BMP reporting templates look like. And there are 4 different ones depending on the type of data that we need to collect. And when we're going through the process of setting up grant agreements, I'll be reviewing all of the projects that involve BMP implementation to make sure that we're providing you with the right template to complete, so you don't have to worry too much about knowing exactly which report template fits your project. We'll help you with that. But essentially, if it's a stormwater treatment practice, we'll need to know the lat long of the project, the area that's being treated, the drainage area, and how much of that is impervious versus pervious land cover. And then if it's a storage practice, we'll need to know the storage volume. And if it's a practice that involves infiltration down into native soils, we'll need to know the infiltration rate. And then for buffer planting projects, we have developed a system to account for the nutrient load reductions once those buffers are established. And that involves us needing to know the lat long for both endpoints of the buffer, And then in-house, we do a GIS analysis to determine the drainage area for that buffer, and then we can come up with an estimated load reduction for it. So those are the different pieces of PMP reporting that's a little bit more detailed than what we had asked for at the project level for performance reports. And it doesn't apply to every single project. It's primarily implementation and stormwater treatment and buffer plantings. But we'll be working with you on an individual basis to define exactly what those reporting requirements look like.
Snazzy.
Great.
Yeah.
So, Emily, on the river corridor easements is a required 50-foot buffer. So would you want that reported through this process?
If you're doing an easement that involves restoration of a buffer, then we would certainly like to be able to account for that. So where you're doing an easement that involves buffer restoration, then we would want to be attaching that buffer planting reporting requirement to that. But if it's an already existing buffer, we likely wouldn't account for it because what we're trying to capture is the change in management. So relative to the TMDL, we're trying to capture load reduction. So if it was something that was already in place, we would be less interested in capturing that than if it's a buffer restoration.
Yeah. Unless it's vulnerable to being removed or altered in the future.
We should talk about that. It probably needs to be addressed on a case-by-case basis, depending on the situation and what part of the state you're in. Mm-hmm. Basically, like for an example, in the Lake Champlain Basin, the TMDL has a baseline period of 2001 to 2010, so we're really trying to capture reductions made after that base load period. Mm-hmm. So if you have some indication that the buffer wasn't present during the TMDL period, then we could talk about that reduction being applied, but we're mostly trying to capture the change in management so we can capture reductions relative to a base load.
And Emily, did I hear you right? This is reporting, not application?
This is reporting.
Okay.
In the future, it's possible we might try to capture more of that BMP information in the design stages so that we can factor load reductions more easily into prioritization for implementation stages. But right now, this reporting only applies to certain practices for the implementation stage on the reporting end, not on the application end.
Okay.
Online question from Emily Davis. So is it true that we'll have more clarity on what the reporting requirements are once we have submitted an application? Then we'd be contacted on an individual basis?
So we will be reviewing, once we select the proposals for funding, any proposals that are funded will go through the process of setting up their grant agreement, and at that stage we will be determining any additional reporting requirements associated with BMPs, and that template for reporting will be included in the grant agreement. Similar to how now there's attachment E with the performance report, if you need to do additional BMP reporting, that will be tacked on to that performance report. But you can also look at the guidance here to kind of get an initial sense of what may be required based on the type of practice that you're implementing, and you can always reach out to me with any questions if you'd like to know more details about what your reporting would look like ahead of that stage in the grant agreement process.
Is your P reduction number that's estimated for a tree planting project, is that based on a matured thing or at the beginning?
It's
or
based
is there a
on
line that gets
once
you there?
they're established, and we've been coordinating with staff here and EPA to figure out the appropriate mechanism to account for that. We are estimating that after about 5 years, the buffer would be fully established. But we're still kind of refining exactly what that looks like. But this will enable us to also go back and field verify that that buffer is still present over time. And if we're accounting for load reductions, we want to make sure that these practices are being maintained and are actually established. And that applies to all of
There's quite a bit of maintenance over time on that.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I think that covers.
Anything else on that? Great. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
The next section about project signage, this is very new and I don't have the full details on it, but there is a new section of the Capitol Bill, H519, that actually requires that there be signage at project sites during construction, so that as you drive by, the public can see that this project was funded by State of Vermont Clean Water Funds.
Whose idea was that?
The legislature.
You don't have to.
Yep. This is the exact wording out of 519. The commissioner of BGS is supposed to work with us and transportation and is to develop a plan for doing this. And right now, that's all there is right now, is the discussion of a plan for doing it. This is not something we will expect you to pay for. It will be coming out of state funds. So there might just be a sign that as you're developing a project, we're going to ask you to stick it in the ground while it's going on. I don't think it's going to be a major thing. And this is during construction. So just
New Hampshire does the same thing.
Okay.
Sorry?
New Hampshire does the same thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I have little moose plate signs all over New Hampshire.
Cool.
Because their license plate,
I
that's
think
what they
Bethany's
do.
making a note to get in touch with them right now. So
Send you the pictures.
That would be great.
terrific. Is there a lot of
Brook trout,
discussion
brook
going on
trout.
about that? Make this happen quickly.
Yeah, the idea is that it would begin with projects this summer.
The intent is so it's recognized as a clean water initiative project.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it would just say Vermont Clean Water Initiative.
Something to that effect,
Maybe
yes.
some kind of a logo on
Very
it, yeah.
simple.
With your little logo.
It's not going to have
Possibly.
3 paragraphs of writing so that you.
So it's
are
not
trying to read it
individualized to
like
the
a-
project.
No, it would be
Oh,
a
like,
uniform
this is
sign for every project.
In fact, there was also a joke going around that I'm not even sure I should share about making just one sign, and we take it to a project and take a picture. That makes it really cheap and simple. I think it might be a little more involved than that, but.
So just to clarify, there, you would not need to include a cost of a sign in the project budget.
Correct. You do not need to worry about this in your application in any way. It's just a heads up that as part of the agreement, we might be needing to include this. Of course.
So part of this is related to this push for greater communications around our project success stories. So we're really trying to do a better job of capturing before and after photos from the same perspective at an appropriate resolution so that we're really able to publicize these projects. And we're going to be working on enhancing our website and the database so that our tracking database, the Watershed Projects database, is more accessible to the public. And you can go in and explore success stories, see before and after photos, and we're going to be, our annual investment report will have accompanied with some success stories that can function as standalone fact sheets and hopefully some scorecards and some really user-friendly materials because the legislature and our other partners are really asking for more communication tools and we want to support that. So that's part of the reason why we're trying to be a little bit more specific with communications-related required deliverables for these grants, and we really appreciate your help with us telling the story.
Yeah, and you'll see. Oh, sorry. You'll see in the milestones and deliverables also more criteria for the before and after photographs, how to do them right, things like that.
So while there's no expectation that it would be a part of the budget as far as the cost of the sign, there is some coordinating time, I would imagine, to do this. I mean, this is still a publicity activity.
Well, things
for
like
the
doing before and
project.
after photos and all that kind of
Yeah.
thing have been previous requirements. Those are certainly aspects of the deliverables that you've had to do before, and we assume you're putting in, time that's needed to do that type of thing.
Right.
The signage itself is not likely to be something that will take you a lot of time. We might ask you the next time you're going out there to stick it in the ground, but other than that, that would be the extent of the request from you. So we do not intend for this to be something that will be expensive.
Yeah, I figured it'd be
Yeah.
a small part, but still a part.
In terms of the changes for photo requirements, for example, whereas photos have been submitted as part of a PDF in the final report, we're asking for photos to be submitted as JPEG so that we can actually use them for other applications beyond just to include in the final report. So that's just one example.
A certain resolution, have the before and after photo taken from the same perspective, so it's not one on one side, one on the other, just basic things like that that make us then able to use them.
Yeah, which will, benefit everyone involved.
good.
So if we're able to share our projects better and the outcomes related to those projects, then I think everyone is better off.
So that's the before and after an implementation
Correct.
step versus shelf life, stewardship, O&M. That's where we're actually finally doing over the course of 10 years, the same photo doc stuff,
great.
which we came to with NRCS and you guys that we needed to do it versus data collection down in the water. It's cheaper. so we're deciding to do, and it's like, I don't think NRCS even typically does that, even though they're obliging to do 10-year shelf life for their design. So I see this coming down the pike for us in terms of an expense and a task.
And they may be, and that's not, we can't give you money in 2017
Right.
that pays for you taking pictures in 2000.
We have to figure it out somehow. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're also not requiring it.
Right.
We're not saying at this point that we want you to do that. That said, we strongly encourage you doing it anytime you can. If you're out at a site where you planted trees 10 years ago and they're looking really awesome, take a picture for us and send it in. We absolutely love those. We're probably not going to send you a check for $50 for doing it, but we.
But when the DEC is asking for stewardship and O&M, the maintenance part over time, it's implying that we spend this time and investment beyond the grant period. So it's going to come back to us.
Take into account as you apply.
It's going to come back to all of us as a thing.
Depends on what the O&M is. In a lot of cases, what we're really focusing on is some of the stormwater projects. Now, you put in a stormwater retention pond, we want to make sure it still functions after 2 years.
You bet.
Put in a rain garden and it gets full of dirt and sediment and it's not functioning anymore. Those are the kinds of things that we're really looking at. We've done some spot checking.
Yep.
Some projects have surprised us a little bit, so certainly we want to make sure that we maintain.
But it sounds like whether it's a JPEG, all the grant reporting will still be electronic.
Yes.
All right. Then lastly, if one of you could pull up the application itself for me. Just want to quickly show you the application and walk through it. It's pretty self-explanatory. I think, I hope that you'll find that it is leaner now. Before you leave this, or maybe it's too late. Doesn't matter. No, go back to the website. Just don't click yet. Just so you can see, if you haven't been to the website yet, you can see the
You've got that tab open still. Sorry. Okay.
Just so you can see what is available here, the application itself, which is a fillable PDF form, is available. Right below it is the manual. Then we have each of the appendices that we've talked about, the map directions, performance measures, milestones, and then the budget. We're going to be talking about that in a minute too. So if you can click on the application, please, and we'll take a look at that. So I'm not going to be able to scroll down, so if one of you can help me while we're doing that, that'd be great.
Quick question from Cindy, if I can interject. Can long-term O&M costs be considered match for the application?
No, unfortunately not, because it's stuff that is going to be happening at a different point in time.
Okay.
So totally understand the value of it and appreciate it. Cannot. So this is the new application form. I think you'll find it's not terribly difficult to do. What is nice about it is it's a fillable PDF. It's got a lot of stuff already in it for you. So, for example, first of all, if you go to the top where it says application manual, you can click on that. You don't need to, and it'll take you directly to the manual, and then you can go directly to the section where you want to be looking up some information. You'll see for 3B, 4, and 5, there are drop-downs, and those provide you the data to fill in that particular section, what watershed your project is in, what project type you have, based again on the pre-populated information. And then the next one is very tough, it's yes, no. So, but the rest of this is relatively simple. Section 2 is the eligibility checklist. Again, these are all things that we've talked about already that you obviously have to do, and this is more of just so you know that you've done everything you have to do, so make sure that you haven't missed anything in the application process. Does this meet the goals of the program? Just gives you another chance to give it another thought. Do you have the necessary support, meaning the watershed database number? That has to be put further up on the application. There is a line right up there for you to put the number in. Number 2, watershed projects database ID number. That's where you have to input that number. Number 3 is whether or not you've done the map, and that link will take you directly to the directions for filling that out. The time frame, are you going to be starting within 3 months, and are you going to be finishing within 1 to 2 years of signing the grant contract? Again, not too difficult. O&M commitment, if you are doing an implementation project, we must have a signed letter of commitment for operation and maintenance. We don't need the operation and maintenance plan. As I said, we're going to discuss that with you and review it as one of the deliverables, but we do have to have the letter of commitment for that. And we're advising them where possible for earlier design and final design projects. The risk of assessment questionnaire is through the business office. All of you have gotten grants from DEC in the past are familiar with this. If it has not been done in the last 12 months, you just need to redo it. So take a look at your status on that. If you have any questions, talk to David Pasco on that. Next section is the project summary. A couple of things on this. First of all, it tells you the page number in the manual to go to answer any questions with regards to this. It also tells you there's a 700-word max. I'm going to see how that works this time.
Good idea.
I've gotten pages and pages and pages of literature from folks in applications. I took a look at how many words 500 is, 700 is, 1,000 is, compared to some of the prior applications. Seems like 700. If you can't do it in 700, you're probably using a few too many words. So let me know how that works out for you. We can increase it to 8 if it's turning out to be a real problem. It also says up here what the scoring is. There is a section in the manual about the scoring criteria and how we evaluate projects, but this also helps you understand the points that we assign to this particular section. So what we're asking here is just 3 things. What's the source and the cause of the problem? What are you planning on doing about it? And why should we give you the money to do it? How are you going to be achieving some nutrient or sediment reduction goals by doing this project? Pretty short and sweet. The next section is the grant milestones. This is where you go to Appendix 3. There's a link right there. You pick out the project type, the milestones and deliverables, and put them in here. At some point in time, we'll try and make this so it too is a drop down and you can just click on things, but we too, Ron, have our limits of technology in the short term. So right now, just fill it in. There is obviously no points in the scoring attached to this because you have to do it. Scroll down, performance measures, the same thing. We did manage to do the drop down here where you have to put in the performance measure and then attach the quantitative value to it. So if you are doing acres of lakeshore that are restored, how many of those acres are you going to be doing? One additional thing that we put in here, don't panic, is cost per unit. One of the things that we want to start to get a handle on is how much it costs to do stuff, how much it costs to do these projects. So cost per unit simply means you are requesting $10,000 to do 10 acres of work. Therefore, 10,000 divided by 10 is 100. It's $100 per acre. That's it. That's all we're asking for in cost per unit.
Unit means acre?
The performance measures. Unit is the quantitative measure, the quantitative value. So it's the number of units. So if you're doing, whatever you're using for your performance measure, divide that by the total cost of the project. Now, granted, you have multiple performance measures, so you're going to have multiple costs per unit, and there's no ranking, prioritization, or anything based on this. This is for us to start gathering data on. We could do the math ourselves. We're just putting it on you instead.
So if you're saying there's 3 measures that we're working on in this grant, and there's, in other words, 3 tasks, basically, and so the cost per unit would be the whole grant amount
divided by that particular performance measure number. So hit the drop-down performance measure 1, please. So stream miles assessed is your performance measure. You're going to do 10 of them. You're requesting $10,000 to do that. It's $100
step
per. Yep. Okay. And there's directions on everything I'm telling you is written up in the manual also.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks.
And again, we're not, this is not something that's supposed to be challenging. It's just a way for us to start gathering some data.
I see.
Okay?
Yep.
Under the budget, this is worth several things as far as points go. You have 25 points out of 100 for the budget itself, but also 15 points out of 100 for match, based on how much match you're able to contribute. We are not requiring match in this any more than we have in the past for these particular, other than the equipment grants, as we mentioned earlier. One of the main reasons why we're not doing that is because we've been getting really tremendous match. We added up the match that we got last year and was averaging 23%, which is fantastic. So the last thing we want to do is require a 20% match when you all have been giving us 23. So instead, we are definitely incentivizing on match. And you'll see in the scoring criteria that's in the manual, if you have higher match, you'll get more points in this category. Are you able to go to the budget template, please, for me there? The other thing that we've done is given you a template for the budget. There is not a budget and then a narrative anymore because we were getting very little in the narrative towards what we really needed, and that's critical. I get frustrated when we get an application for someone looking for $100,000 and they want to put $10,000 towards supplies, but no explanation of what the supplies are. Also, you have $1,000 for personnel, but we don't know if that's one person working 1 hour for $1,000 or 10 people working 10 hours for whatever that math works out to be. So here you have the budget template that we're requiring you to use. And it's also set up so it has formulas in it. So that was another thing. Math is a challenge for me, especially, and we were having to check all of the budgets and make sure it all added up right. So this is in an Excel spreadsheet on the website, so you can add to it. For example, if you have more than 4 people working on this project, or more than a certain number of supplies, if you go further down, you can add in more names if you need them. But we are expecting this to be detailed. So for supplies, we want 200 plants to be used for the tree planting, and we want to know how many, the cost per stem, for example. And then the gray boxes all have formulas in them. They will automatically fill and add up at the bottom. Questions, Steve?
Subcontractors?
Subcontractors can be listed in this, but we also want the details about it under personnel. But there is also, we also requesting that separately as we have before. If you have
Wait a second. So break down a subcontractor's costs under this.
Yeah, we did. We obviously did not put that into the budget, which we should have. So put it under other expenses for now.
So
then-
contract out is under other.
I'll add that to the manual. Yep.
Except does the other have the hours?
It doesn't. It just has the unit cost, but you can do it the same way.
Okay, got it.
And please don't hesitate to add as an attachment any more details if you have something more detailed for that. We have asked that in the past with regards to contractors to add in any additional information. So if you need to add more, please do, because the budget points that you get for this are very much based on how much information you give us. And if we have to question what the money's going towards, that is definitely going to impact the scores on it.
Travel. Is there a state-approved rate? Should we use a federal rate?
I encourage you to use the federal rate, yes. If you have a different rate that's lower, feel free to use it. But
Sorry.
And do I see admin indirect on there?
there's indirect at the bottom. Yeah,
You
there's
put
indirect.
At the very bottom. Thank you.
At the bottom.
Yep.
So all you need to enter in are the number values in the white cells, and everything in gray is automatically going to calculate and tally up for you.
On indirect, since all of us have different indirect rates, are there any limits?
There's no set limit. We don't have a limit. But obviously, that affects cost effectiveness. So if 2 organizations have the same capabilities, doing the same project, and one has a 35% indirect and one has a 15%, it would be a factor in cost effectiveness. But other than that, there's no limit. So, all right. Back to the applications, please. The last tab. Yep. The next category is past performance. This is worth 15 points. This is where you let us know how you are able to accomplish this grant. If you have had projects with us in the past 5 years, please let us know. Please let us know if you had any challenges meeting those. If you needed to request an extension, please let us know. We are not going to be penalizing you based on the fact that you requested an extension in the past, because we definitely have allowed extensions. And there are extensions that were issued for extenuating circumstances that folks had no control over. So, for example, if you were trying to do a project and Irene hit, we can hardly penalize you for needing an extension in a case like that. However, as is written into the manual quite extensively, we are going to be very seriously frowning on issuing extensions, because we are being judged on how quickly we get projects done, how effectively and efficiently we get them done. And as I said before, if we don't get money allocated by next fiscal year, by the end of FY18, July 1st of next year, we are not going to get money for the year after that. So it is very critical to us that projects be done. If you don't think you can do the project in the time frame and you're going to need an extension, plan accordingly ahead. So please be very careful about this. But this is the category where you let us know your past performance and meeting deliverables.
And will each of these new rounds be a 1-year time frame from your grant agreement?
Within 1 to 2 years.
1 to 2.
Up to 2 years, yes, but obviously the quicker the better. Yep. but we are allowing up to 2 years.
Marley, what if an organization can demonstrate, does not have a history, but can demonstrate that they now have capacity?
Absolutely. That's exactly what should be in here also.
Okay.
Is yes. And there's more detail in the manual about this also. But yes, if you have never applied before for a grant, but you have the capacity, by all means, let us know.
Okay. So that's where they should be putting that in. Okay.
Then lastly, additional materials. This is where you should feel free to add whatever you think strengthens your application. One of the things I've been surprised about, to be honest, is applications that come in without any letter of support. We don't require letters of support, but obviously if we're looking at your application and you have a strong letter from the Watershed organization that is local to the area that has done water sampling and feels that this is a critical project, or from 3 landowners that are adjacent to it, whatever that would affect the value of the project in some indirect ways, please let us know. You're certainly welcome to get letters of support from Fish and Wildlife, from DEC folks, anything. We definitely encourage those strongly. And just attach those separately as PDFs. One thing the business office has asked, and I'm not sure how this was worded last year, but folks have put all of their documents together in the past into one PDF. Please don't do that. It drives David nuts because he's got to separate it back out. So you have the application. You have your budget. That's a separate. You send it back to us as a PDF, so we won't alter it. Your attachments, your letters of support. Please, when you send things to us, send them as separate PDFs to us, so we're able to keep them separate.
Is that in the manual, Lauren?
Yes, it is.
So if I recall correctly, in this past year, the wording was like letters of support from local, community, as opposed to, say, federal agency partners. Is that still preferred?
Any letters of support are welcome. So this is it for the application. This is the whole thing.
Super.
So hopefully that will be relatively simple and easy to understand. And then the last slide is just to sorry, we were both advancing at the same time. Just to let you know some baseline information. First of all, if you have any questions about the grant program itself, don't hesitate to contact me. If you have a question about your particular project, I suggest you go to your basin planner directly. They're the best able to advise you on the value of the project and encourage or discourage your application. Emily is certainly your point person with regards to performance measures and the tracking and accountability and the forms. But obviously, if you want to call me first, David Pasco, you're all used to working with in the business office with regards to invoicing questions or anything like that. The first 2 websites there, cleanwater.gov and the DEC website, both take you to that screen in the upper right-hand corner, and that's where you can find all of the grant-related information. And the other 3 websites that are listed here relate to things that we've been discussing over the last hour or so. Where you can find the treasurer's report if you want to look at the Tier 1 costs and the spreadsheet that are in Appendix 1. Where you can find details on tactical basin planning and the water quality stressors that we mentioned also with regards to the scoring. So.
Marley, I will add these links to the grants page on our website so they're all in one place.
And are we going to be able to, can we save this PowerPoint on our website also?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Do that. And we'll be posting this recording on our Clean Water Initiative YouTube page as well. So if you know of someone who couldn't attend today, you can definitely direct them to that page to view the webinar.
So this concludes what we wanted to share with you. Are there any last questions, either from folks in the room or folks online?
Hey, Marley, Dan Albrecht.
Yep, Dan?
Hey, thanks for the presentation. And I just had a question. You may have touched on this, but perhaps a refresh on, some of the ones that didn't get funded last year, and what are some of the problems? What causes proposals to fail?
Okay, so the question doesn't have to do with grant agreements. It's what causes the project to not be funded. Certainly the process is based on the priorities that we indicated in the earlier slides. It's how the project meets those priorities and addresses them. The scoring criteria and descriptions of each of those is also listed in the manual. So take a look at that. It's how we give the various points. So for example, in the budget, the maximum is 15, but the manual also shows what you need to get 15, what you need to get 10, why you're going to only get 3 in that category. So there's some detail on how we score things. Other than that, the projects, obviously the evaluation of the projects are based on the available funds and the value that we attach to them. So there's going to be a review team that is going to look at all the projects. There's going to be a score attached to each of the projects based on the criteria we just talked about. And then we're going to go down and fund projects that meet a particular score based on the applicability of those projects, and at what point the cutoff is where we're no longer getting the projects that meet the highest priorities. So we'll have all that information.
So to Dan's point, that process that the review committee goes through will be summarized and sent and shared.
One thing that we are going to be doing, and the reason I didn't bring it up is because we haven't figured out the exact process, and I'm pretty sure I don't want it all dumped on me, but one thing we will be doing is if your project is denied, we will be sending you a letter with your score and indicating why it was denied and how you could strengthen the proposal in the future.
Terrific.
So please be patient for that letter. Obviously, with our grant rounds on a quarterly basis, might be interested in reapplying quickly. So if you don't get that letter quick enough, don't hesitate to call me and ask. But that's why it's really imperative to us to try and turn this around as quickly as possible. So that, for example, we're going to be looking at this grant round July 6th. We want to let you know by the end of July whether or not you're getting funded, so that if you want to apply again, you have the opportunity to tweak the project by September 19th, which is the next date we're going to do the criteria. One thing that I do need to let you know, though, is what is likely to also slow down this evaluation process now is that not only do we have to evaluate it, but the legislature has now asked that all of the projects that we put forward to recommend for funding be evaluated by the Treasurer's Office. So now we say we want to fund these 25 projects, we have to send that list to the Treasurer's Office for their approval before we can.
For capital funds only, or is that for all funding?
I think it's for all funding. And
Will you be only doing fully funding projects, or will there be partial funding approved?
David Pasco gets really unhappy when we partially fund things. It is unlikely we will do very many of those, especially, as I said, since we have a rolling grant round now. If we don't like the project, this is why. We're going to tell you why. Please change this, resubmit. And that's for a couple reasons. One is because partial funding is a real challenge from the business office point of view. Partially because we are responsible for a whole lot more money than we have been in the past through the multiple grant programs, and we have no additional staff. In fact, we're down one grant person right now. 2 grant people if you count the person in the business office too. So it's for efficiencies reasons, and also so that that's one of the reasons why we created the rolling grant, is so that you can quickly fix things. We're going to say, nope, you didn't do it. Another thing also to be aware of, if the application is not filled in appropriately, if you don't have the budget detail or something, we're not going to go back to you and say, hey, can you please fill in this blank? We're going to send the whole thing back to you and say, you didn't do it, please reapply. I'm sorry, but we just don't have the resources to really be negotiating on what we expect to be as many as 70, 80 applications or more per round. So there's just a limit to the resources we have to do that.
Finally, a question from Marie. Please address how much money will be available in future rounds.
Yeah, I'm afraid I can't tell you that exactly. Right now there's $3.1 million available for this grant process. We will let you know after we rank these how many dollars are left, and we will keep you informed as it goes along, because as I said, we don't want you waiting for the last grant round and us running out of money in the 3rd grant round. So we will keep folks up to date on that, and once we have gone through the grants for this application, we'll let folks know what the balance is. We have not allocated set dollars per grant round, just decided that was too risky, because we need to be open to whatever comes in. Lynn?
I don't remember if you've mentioned, I think in the past there's been a limit of 3 applications.
There is no limit.
There's no limit now.
There's no limit. An organization can submit as many applications as you choose.
Okay. And so then
one project per application.
And then I know this is probably a question that you can't answer, but as people are deciding which grant round to apply for, knowing when their grant contracts will be signed is going to make a difference.
Absolutely,
And
it does.
so will there be some point where there's a guideline, something that comes out from the business office that says, okay, so it's going to be awarded at the end of July, grant contracts will be signed by X date?
This has an anticipated notification of awards, and the goal is for project grant agreements to be done within a month of that.
Okay.
Again,
So that's the guideline, is a month.
that is what we are going to be shooting for. I'm obviously acknowledging that that has not occurred.
Right.
Yep. But there is a hiring process going on for an additional person in the business office, and we're hoping that they'll be able to move things forward more quickly in the future. And also, a lot of the changes that we've talked about over the last hour and a half will also help a lot. For example, David won't be negotiating with each of you on the milestones and deliverables. They're already in there. They're done. So there are things in here that will make a big difference. We also won't have to spend as much time looking at potential conflicts, where we look at maps and decide whether it's in a wetland or not. That kind of stuff will be cut down. The time on things like that will be cut down tremendously too. So we're very aware of the challenge of this, and can't tell you how much we appreciate folks' patience in this, and understand that the business office is trying to do the best it can.
This is a huge advance.
Yeah.
This is a huge, what you've done.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Huge.
Yeah.
What you've
Never
done.
quite know. I certainly didn't know at 8 o'clock this morning what 12 o'clock would look like. So
It's
glad to do
amazing.
that, and I think we should sign off. Are there any more questions by folks on the phone? If
Thanks
not,
very
let's
much.
close.
Echo Marty's comments.
Yay, from Dan. Excellent.
Are you able, sorry, I know that you're ready to close out, but if there's any way that just a couple minutes on the block grant, just to get a sense
Yeah, if there are any
of-
questions on the block grant that folks want to ask, I'll do the best I can to answer them, and
Sure.
certainly
I've
we'll...
got 7 dam removals. Do I submit 7 different applications to the Clean Water Fund, or do I submit them all under the block grant?
The block grant is intended for statewide efforts. So and the idea is...
That literally
and-
means
And
statewide.
the other issue is, are those 7 dams on the go list?
Right.
If they're not on the go list, they're not eligible for the block grant. The block grant is for an organization to take projects off the go list.
But let's say
So-
they were,
If
Right.
they were,
but they're in, half of the state, the eastern half.
priority is going to be given to an organization that is going to be looking at statewide projects. We are not asking you in the application, the RFP period, what projects you're going to choose. So all we're asking is, who are you? What is your intent? And if you say, I'm intending to do 7 dam removal projects in these locations, that's great. That's certainly information to us. But what we mainly get out of this 2-week RFP process is who you are, how you intend to maximize the implementation of projects off the go list on a statewide basis.
You're looking at something in every county. If it's statewide, that's what you're talking
We're
about.
not necessarily going to say that you have to have one in every county, because frankly, I'm not even sure there's a project in every county on the go list. I think there is, but I wouldn't.
Okay.
And so then there's the intention that the recipient of this block grant would then distribute to, would be directly overseeing each of these projects, or would be working with partners to oversee this project?
They can certainly
Would they
work
have
with partners,
sub-grantees?
but as you will see in the block grant application and guidance, there is a recommendation of keeping as close to 10% admin as possible. So we are not expecting you to subcontract to other people for this. We're expecting the organization to be working to get the project implemented. So if it's a stormwater project here, you're going to work with the Boys and King, and you're going to take the money of that 1.5 million and put it towards that and get that project done. So the intention is not to go and do a whole bunch of subcontracts. The idea is for this organization to be capable of doing the
So that organization needs to have a statewide reach then, to be able to be managing these projects across the state.
That will be a priority, yes. If there is an organization that has the ability to work statewide, that will be prioritized over one that is only going to do projects in Franklin County, for example. That doesn't mean they won't get funded. Again, we're looking at the organizations and what comes in. I really am going to be very interested to see what comes of this. The limitations on the admin is going to slow a lot of people down. It really is. We were going to just require 10% admin, and frankly, we're concerned that people wouldn't even apply, because that can be very difficult for some organizations.
Is that just for block or for everything?
That's just for block. That's just for but decisions will be made on how close they get to that 10% and the statewide ability of the organization to do projects. All right. On that note, thank you all very much on the phone and in the room for joining us. Please don't hesitate to ask questions, but in the future, But also don't hesitate to look in the manual first and see if the answers are there.